Hey, what's going on? Jeff Ratcliffe here. It's fantasy football draft season. You know, everybody's looking at their draft, but sometimes we have to look at the entire NFL season, right? The schedule. And you know, probably out there on the interwebs, fantasy strength of schedule is something you might have looked at. Now, what a lot of folks do when they look at fantasy strength of schedules, they base it on last year's points, right? How many points did which defense give up to quarterbacks, etc. But here's the problem with that particular way of looking at things. We're not playing last year. We're not playing last week. We're playing right now. So we need to really be basing strength of schedule on the current defensive rosters that we're going up against. And that's exactly what we do with our strength of schedule at Pro Football Focus, which we're basing on our grades. You get that at profootballfocus.com. In terms of quarterbacks who we're going to look at right now, it's really the coverage grades and the pass rush grades of the opposing defense that factor in most heavily into this strength of schedule. So we're going to look at the worst quarterbacks here. Of course, you can check out our other video on the best quarterback schedules. But here are the worst that stand out to me. I'll give you the 5 worst. And what I'm going to do, by the way, is look at overall and playoff, right? So it's not just overall. It's really who are we zeroing in on in the fantasy playoffs as either good or bad matchups. Remember, this is all going to change throughout the course of the year as well. But let's start with the New York Football Giants. Number 32 overall, that is also known as dead last. Number 7 during the fantasy playoffs. So keep that one in mind, but let's just look at this brutal schedule for Eli Manning. Open the season with the Jags. Okay, that's no fun. Get a string of bad matchups over the next 6 weeks, including the Saints, the Eagles, and they get the Eagles again in week 12. So it's a really tough start to the season, but it's going to be weird. It's going to sort of be like a storm for most of the year, and then the clouds are going to part in the fantasy playoffs, and they get a very nice matchup to really end out the fantasy season, I should say, in week 16 against the Colts. So Eli Manning could end up, he's probably not going to be on a fantasy championship team, but he could end up being a factor in week 16, but it is a tough schedule for him overall. Next up, the Los Angeles Rams, number 31. Overall, number 28 in the fantasy playoffs. Jared Goff, we know last year, one of the biggest breakouts at the quarterback position. Big fantasy surprise, but he does get that tough schedule. There's a rough stretch to open the season from weeks 3 to 5. They get the Chargers, the Vikings, the Seahawks. And I know the Seahawks aren't necessarily the Seahawks of Legion of Boom era, but they're still a good defense. It's going to be tough for Jared Goff. They also face the Eagles in week 15, so that's a very tough matchup there. Next up, Arizona, similar schedule, right, to Los Angeles here, number 28 overall, number 8 in the fantasy playoffs, so you get a little bit of that similar to the Giants here. But the big question ultimately is, how long is Sam Bradford going to be under center? Is he even going to be under center when we open the season, or is Josh Rosen going to start the season as the starter? You have to figure at some point during the year this team is going to look to get Josh Rosen on the field, and the schedule is not going to do him any favors. Now, they do get a somewhat favorable matchup in week 14 against the Lions, but of course, they do have the Rams in week 16. So I don't know how much streamer value we're going to get out of those Cardinals quarterbacks. How about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers up next? 29th overall, 29th during the playoffs. Here's the thing. Jameis Winston is suspended for the first 3 weeks of the season, so Ryan Fitzpatrick will be under center. If we look at the schedule for Ryan Fitzpatrick, this is a nightmare. They open up with New Orleans, then they get Philly, then they get the Steelers. The Steelers' pass rush is no joke. Last year, one of the best in the league in that regard. That is that's a nightmare stretch for Ryan Fitzpatrick. So the Bucs could get off to a potentially slow start in the passing game. Just keep that in mind. Of course, when Jameis Winston gets back, I guess you could say it's a little better, but not that much better. They do have a Week 7 matchup against the Browns, somewhat favorable. Week 11 against the Giants, that's a good one there. If you play DFS, maybe we look at Jameis Winston in Week 11. The last one on my list here, Kansas City, number 30 overall, number 32 in the fantasy playoffs. Not good there for Patrick Mahomes. He gets a rough one as his first year in the starting spot here for the Chiefs. Of course, they get the Chargers. They start the season with the Chargers, and it's not going to get that much better from there. They have a brutal end to the year as well. In the fantasy playoffs, they get the Ravens, the Chargers, and the Seahawks. No fun. But you know what? Ultimately, We're only going to move our guys around just a little bit based on these schedules. You know, you're looking at it from an upside standpoint. This isn't saying don't draft Patrick Mahomes. I still like Patrick Mahomes as a high ceiling option in his first year, but he does have a very tough slate of games to go up against. Who do you think has the worst quarterback schedule? Why don't you tell us in the comments below? Of course, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more videos. And go check out all the fantasy football goodness at ProFootballFocus.com.